The iron shackles around Olivia Norton's wrists had worn her skin raw by the time her uncle dragged her into the saloon that scorching afternoon in July of 1878. And she knew with a sinking certainty that whatever dregs of family loyalty had once existed between them had finally been drowned in whiskey. Fair play. Colorado sat high in the mountains where the air was thin and the summers brief but intense, and the Silver Dollar Saloon was packed with miners and ranch hands seeking relief from the afternoon heat. Olivia stumbled as her uncle Bernard Norton yanked her forward, her worn boots catching on the threshold. She was 20 years old, dark-haired and blue-eyed, with the kind of delicate beauty that had once made her mother proud before consumption had taken her 3 years past. Her dress was torn at the hem and stained with trail dust, and she could feel every eye in the saloon turning toward her as Bernard shoved her roughly against the bar. "I got something to sell," Bernard announced loudly, his words slurring together. His breath reeked of cheap liquor, and his eyes had that glassy look that Olivia had learned to fear. "My niece here. She is young, she is strong, and she can cook and clean. I will take payment in whiskey or cash, makes no difference to me." The saloon fell silent for a moment, and then someone laughed nervously. Olivia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she stared at the sawdust-covered floor. This was not the first time Bernard had threatened to sell her since her parents died and left her in his care, but she had never believed he would actually go through with it. Now, she understood how wrong she had been. "You cannot be serious," the bartender said, his thick mustache twitching with disapproval. "You cannot just sell a person, Norton. That is illegal." "She owes me," Bernard snarled, tightening his grip on Olivia's arm until she gasped with pain. "I have fed her and housed her for 3 years. She is mine to do with as I please. Someone here must want a wife or a servant. I am not particular about which." Olivia's throat constricted with terror. She had nowhere to go, no family except for this monster who shared her blood, and no money of her own. When her father had died, Bernard had taken control of the small inheritance, and within 6 months it had all disappeared into the bottom of whiskey bottles. She had tried to find work, but every time she secured a position, Bernard would show up drunk and cause such a scene that she would be dismissed. He wanted to keep her dependent on him, trapped in his miserable existence. "I will give you 3 bottles of my best whiskey for her freedom." The voice came from the back corner of the saloon, deep and steady and utterly calm. Every head turned toward the speaker, including Olivia's. A man stood up from a card table, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore dusty range clothes and a hat pushed back on his head, revealing eyes the color of warm honey. There was something in his face that spoke of hardness earned through experience, but also of a fundamental decency that Olivia could sense even from across the room. "What did you say?" Bernard asked, his grip on Olivia loosening slightly in his surprise. The man walked forward with an easy, confident stride, his spurs jingling softly with each step. "I said I will give you 3 bottles of whiskey for the girl's freedom. Not to own her, you understand. To set her free. No strings, no obligations. She walks out of here a free woman, and you get your whiskey and get out of her life forever." He stopped a few feet from Bernard, and Olivia could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27. There was a gun on his hip, worn with the ease of someone who knew how to use it, but his hands hung loose and relaxed at his sides. He did not look like he was spoiling for a fight, but neither did he look like a man who would back down from one. 3 bottles. Bernard's eyes gleamed with greed and suspicion. "What is your angle, cowboy? Why would you pay good whiskey for a girl you do not even want?" "I did not say I did not want her," the man replied evenly. I said I am buying her freedom. What she does with it is her choice, not mine, and certainly not yours anymore." He pulled out a leather pouch from his vest pocket and jingled it significantly. "Or I can pay in silver dollars if you prefer, though I figured you for a whiskey man." Bernard licked his lips, his resolve visibly wavering. Olivia held her breath, afraid to hope. 3 bottles of good whiskey would keep her uncle drunk for a week at least, maybe longer if he rationed it. But would he really let her go? Or was this some cruel trick? 5 bottles, Bernard countered, showing more business sense than Olivia had given him credit for. The cowboy shook his head slowly. 3. And if you try to haggle with me again, I will withdraw my offer and have the sheriff escort you out of town for attempting to sell a human being, which, as the bartender correctly noted, is illegal in the state of Colorado and has been since before you were born. There was steel beneath the cowboy's calm tone, and Bernard must have heard it because he suddenly released Olivia's arm and thrust out his hand. 3 bottles. The good stuff, none of that rot gut. Agreed. The cowboy turned to the bartender. Tom, 3 bottles of your best whiskey for this man. Put it on my tab. The bartender hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the transaction, but then he nodded and reached under the bar. If you say so, Matthew, but this does not sit right with me. It does not sit right with me either, Matthew replied. But sometimes you have to do things that do not sit right to make things right. While the bartender retrieved the bottles, Matthew turned his attention to Olivia for the first time. His eyes were kind as they met hers, and she saw no predatory interest in them, no calculation about what he might extract from her now that he had paid for her freedom. Instead, she saw only concern and a question. "What is your name, miss?" "Olivia Norton," she whispered, her voice rough from unshed tears. "I am Matthew Gallagher. I run cattle on a spread about 10 miles south of here." He spoke gently, as if addressing a spooked horse. "After your uncle leaves, I would be honored if you would allow me to buy you a meal and we could discuss what you would like to do next. But if you would prefer to just walk away right now and never see me again, that is your right, and I will not stop you." Before Olivia could respond, the bartender set 3 dark glass bottles on the bar with a heavy thunk. Bernard snatched them up eagerly, cradling them against his chest like precious treasures. He did not even glance at Olivia as he turned toward the door, but then he paused and looked back with a sneer. "You are a fool, Gallagher. She is worthless, lazy, and willful. You wasted your whiskey." "Get out," Matthew said quietly, and something in his voice made Bernard actually flinch. The older man scurried toward the door, and a moment later he was gone, disappearing into the bright sunlight outside. Olivia swayed on her feet, suddenly light-headed. The shackles were still on her wrists, cold and heavy, and she stared down at them as if they belonged to someone else. 3 years she had endured Bernard's cruelty, his drunken rages, his threats and humiliations. And now, just like that, she was free. It seemed impossible. "Tom, do you have a key for those?" Matthew asked, gesturing to the shackles. "I might have something in the back." The bartender disappeared through a door behind the bar, and the normal sounds of the saloon began to resume as men returned to their drinks and card games. But Olivia could still feel curious eyes on her, and she hugged her arms close to her body, trying to make herself smaller. "You are safe now," Matthew said softly. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word that I mean you no harm. I have a younger sister, and if she were ever in the situation you just were, I would hope someone would help her." Olivia finally found the courage to meet his eyes again. "Why did you really do it? You do not know me. I could be everything my uncle said I am." Matthew's expression turned thoughtful. "I have been in this territory for 5 years, and I have learned to read men pretty well. Your uncle is a drunk and a coward who would sell his own kin for a few bottles of whiskey. Whatever he says about you, I would be inclined to believe the opposite." He paused, then added carefully, "But more than that, it was just the right thing to do. I could not sit there and watch him sell you like livestock and do nothing." The bartender returned with a small iron key, and Matthew took it from him with a nod of thanks. "May I?" he asked Olivia, holding up the key. She extended her wrists, and he bent over them, his fingers surprisingly gentle as he worked the key in the locks. The first shackle clicked open and fell away, and Olivia gasped at the sudden relief. The skin beneath was rubbed raw and bleeding slightly, and Matthew's jaw tightened when he saw it. "Did he do this on the trail here?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "He put them on 2 days ago when I tried to run away." Olivia watched as he unlocked the second shackle. "He said if I tried again, he would chain me to a wagon wheel and leave me in the mountains." The second shackle fell away, hitting the floor with a dull clang. Matthew set the key on the bar and then very carefully took Olivia's hands in his own, examining her injured wrists with a concerned frown. His hands were calloused and warm, the hands of a working man, but his touch was feather-light. "Tom, do you have any clean bandages and salve? I will see what I can find." The bartender bustled away again, clearly relieved to have something practical to do. Matthew released Olivia's hands and gestured toward a table in the corner, away from the main press of bodies. "Will you sit with me? You look like you are about to fall over." She realized he was right. Her knees felt weak and her head was spinning. She let him guide her to the table and sank gratefully into a chair. Matthew took the seat across from her, removing his hat and setting it on the empty chair beside him. His hair was thick and dark, and there was dust in it from the trail. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Olivia had to think about it. "Yesterday morning. Bernard did not want to waste food on me when he was planning to sell me anyway." Matthew's expression darkened, but he only nodded and raised a hand to catch the attention of a young woman in a faded calico dress who was serving tables. "Sarah, could you bring us 2 plates of whatever stew is cooking today and some bread and water?" "Sure thing, Matthew." The girl smiled at him warmly, then looked at Olivia with open curiosity before hurrying away. "She seems to know you well," Olivia observed, surprised at the slight pang of jealousy that twisted in her chest. She had no claim on this man, no right to feel anything about who smiled at him. "Sarah is Tom's daughter. She has been running food and drinks here since she was old enough to carry a tray." Matthew leaned back in his chair, studying Olivia with those steady honey-colored eyes. "This is a small town. Most everybody knows everybody, at least by sight. Have you lived here long?" "About 5 years, like I said. I came out from Missouri after the war, looking for a fresh start. Worked as a ranch hand for a while, saved my money and bought my own spread 3 years ago. It is not much, just a few hundred acres and a couple hundred head of cattle, but it is mine." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Olivia felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Here was a man who had worked for what he had, who valued what he had built. So different from Bernard, who had squandered everything that came into his hands. Tom returned with bandages and a small tin of salve, which he set on the table before retreating once more. Matthew opened the tin, and the sharp, clean smell of herbs filled the air. "May I?" he asked again, gesturing to Olivia's wrists. She nodded, extending her arms across the table. Matthew took her left hand first, cradling it gently in his palm while he used his other hand to apply the salve to her raw skin. It stung at first, and Olivia hissed in a breath, but then the pain began to ease. He worked with focused concentration, his touch sure and careful, and Olivia found herself studying his face while he worked. He had strong features, a straight nose and a firm jaw shadowed with stubble. There were small lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun, and a thin scar along his left temple that disappeared into his hairline. "How did you get that scar?" she asked impulsively. Matthew glanced up, then smiled slightly. "A horse kicked me when I was 14, knocked me unconscious for 3 days. My mother said I was never quite right after that." There was humor in his voice, self-deprecating and warm. "I think you seem perfectly right to me," Olivia said softly, and then blushed at her own boldness. His smile widened, transforming his face from merely handsome to genuinely beautiful. "Well, I appreciate that, Miss Norton. Though I should warn you that there are at least a dozen people in this town who would disagree with you, starting with the banker who thinks I am too soft on my debtors, and ending with Mrs. Henderson, who thinks I am a heathen for only attending church twice a month." He finished with her left wrist and began wrapping it with a clean bandage, his movements practiced and efficient. "Did you learn medicine?" Olivia asked. "Just basic field care. When you are out on the range with cattle, you learn to patch up injuries, both animal and human. I have set broken bones, stitched up cuts, and once I even pulled a tooth for one of my ranch hands, though I do not recommend the experience for either party." Sarah arrived with 2 steaming plates of stew, thick with chunks of beef and vegetables, along with a basket of bread and 2 glasses of water. The smell made Olivia's stomach clench with hunger so fierce it was almost painful. Matthew thanked Sarah and then gestured for Olivia to eat. "Go on. Do not wait for me." Olivia did not need to be told twice. She picked up the spoon and began to eat, trying to pace herself but failing as her hunger took over. The stew was rich and savory, the best thing she had tasted in weeks, and the bread was still warm from the oven. Matthew ate more slowly, watching her with a mixture of satisfaction and anger that she suspected was directed at her uncle rather than at her. "Better?" he asked when she finally slowed down. "Much better. Thank you." Olivia took a long drink of water, washing down the last of the bread. "I do not know how to repay you for all this." "You do not owe me anything," Matthew said firmly. "I meant what I said before. I bought your freedom, not you. You are your own person, Miss Norton, and what you do now is entirely your choice." Olivia set down her glass and folded her bandaged hands in her lap. "I do not have anywhere to go. My parents are dead. I have no other family except Bernard, and I do not have any money or possessions except the clothes on my back." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I am not asking for charity, Mr. Gallagher, but if you know of anyone who might need a housekeeper or a cook or someone to do laundry, I would be grateful for the introduction. I am a hard worker, despite what my uncle said." Matthew was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "As it happens, I do need a housekeeper. My current one, Mrs. Patterson, is moving to Denver next week to live with her daughter. She has been helping me run my household for the past 2 years, and without her, I will be living on burned bacon and wrinkled shirts." He paused, then added carefully, "The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You would have your own room in the main house, and your duties would include cooking, cleaning, laundry, and managing the household supplies. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and they take care of their own quarters, but they eat their meals at the main house." $30 a month was more than generous, and Olivia felt a rush of hope so strong it made her dizzy. But she forced herself to ask the question that needed asking. "What else would you expect from me?" Matthew's eyes darkened with understanding. "Nothing beyond what I just described. You would be my employee, Miss Norton, not my mistress or my servant. I would expect you to do your job well, and in return, I would pay you fairly and treat you with respect." If I ever gave you reason to feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you would be free to leave at any time, and I would help you find other employment." There was such sincerity in his voice that Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because someone should be," Matthew replied simply. "And because I have been in difficult situations myself, and I remember what it felt like when someone gave me a chance I did not think I deserved." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I am not a saint, Miss Norton. I have made my share of mistakes, and I am sure I will make more. But I try to live by a code that includes helping people when I can and treating others the way I would want to be treated. Today, that meant getting you away from your uncle. Tomorrow, if you are willing, it means giving you a job and a safe place to live while you figure out what you want to do with your life." Olivia wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, careful not to disturb the bandages on her wrists. "I accept your offer, Mr. Gallagher, and thank you for everything. You are welcome." Matthew smiled at her again, and Olivia felt something shift in her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had almost forgotten it existed. Hope, and perhaps, just perhaps, the first stirrings of something more. "And please call me Matthew. Mr. Gallagher makes me sound like my father, and I am not nearly respectable enough to carry that off." They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Matthew paid the tab and led Olivia outside into the afternoon sunshine. Fairplay stretched out before them, a collection of wood frame buildings lining a main street thick with mud and horse droppings. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still touched with snow even in July, and the air was crisp and clean despite the heat. Matthew's horse was tied to the hitching post outside the saloon, a handsome bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a white blaze down his face. "This is Copper," Matthew said, stroking the horse's neck. "He is as steady as they come. Do you ride?" "I used to before my parents died. But I have not been on a horse in 3 years." "Well, you will have to ride behind me today, but tomorrow we can see about getting you your own mount." Matthew swung up into the saddle with easy grace and then extended his hand down to Olivia. "Put your foot on mine and I will pull you up." Olivia hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His grip was strong and sure, and he lifted her up behind him as if she weighed nothing at all. She settled onto the horse's back, acutely aware of how close she was to Matthew, how she had to put her arms around his waist to keep from falling off. He smelled of leather and sun-warmed cotton and something else, something essentially masculine that made her heart beat faster. "Hold on tight," he said over his shoulder, and then he turned Copper's head south and urged him into an easy trot. They left Fairplay behind and followed a well-worn trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The late afternoon sun slanted through the trees, dappling the ground with golden light, and birds sang in the branches overhead. Olivia had not realized how starved she was for beauty until this moment, surrounded by the grandeur of the Colorado mountains and feeling the solid warmth of Matthew's back against her chest. For 3 years, she had lived in squalor with Bernard, confined to a shabby cabin where the only view was of his drunken rages. Now the world had opened up again, vast and full of possibility. After about half an hour, the trees opened up to reveal a broad valley crisscrossed with fences and dotted with cattle. A creek ran through the middle of the valley, its waters sparkling in the sunlight, and at the far end sat a house and several outbuildings. The house was modest but well kept, built of logs with a covered porch across the front and a stone chimney rising from one end. Smoke curled from the chimney, and as they drew closer, Olivia could see a vegetable garden flourishing beside the house and chickens scratching in a fenced yard. "Welcome to the Gallagher Ranch," Matthew said, and there was that note of pride in his voice again. "It is not fancy, but it is home." He brought Copper to a stop in front of the house and dismounted, then turned to help Olivia down. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her to the ground, and for just a moment they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his honey-colored eyes. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell, and gestured toward the house. "Let me introduce you to Mrs. Patterson. She will be glad to finally meet her replacement." The front door opened before they reached it, and a plump woman in her 60s stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she looked from Matthew to Olivia with undisguised curiosity. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Olivia Norton. She has agreed to take over your position when you leave next week." Matthew's tone was carefully neutral, but Olivia suspected he had left out most of the story of how they had met. Mrs. Patterson came forward and took Olivia's hands in hers, then frowned when she felt the bandages. "What happened to your wrists, child?" "It is a long story," Olivia said quietly. "But Matthew helped me, and now I am here." The older woman's eyes sharpened, and she looked at Matthew with a question in her expression. He gave the slightest shake of his head, and Mrs. Patterson seemed to understand. "Well then, welcome to the Gallagher Ranch, Miss Norton. I am very pleased to meet you, and I will be happy to show you the ropes before I leave. Matthew here is a good man and a fair employer, but he cannot cook to save his life, and he has a tendency to forget to do his laundry until he is down to his last clean shirt." She patted Olivia's hands gently before releasing them. "Come inside, dear. I just made a fresh pot of coffee and we can get you settled into your room." The interior of the house was as neat and welcoming as the exterior. The front door opened into a large room that served as both parlor and dining area, with a stone fireplace on one wall and a long wooden table surrounded by chairs in the center. Doorways led off to what Olivia assumed were bedrooms and a kitchen, and the whole space smelled of coffee and baking bread and beeswax polish. Mrs. Patterson led Olivia through the house, pointing out the kitchen with its large cast-iron stove and well-stocked pantry, the washroom with its copper tub and hand pump, and finally, a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a braided rug on the floor, but it was clean and bright and entirely Olivia's own. She stood in the doorway, looking at the bed with its quilted coverlet and the window with its cheerful gingham curtains, and felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Oh, honey." Mrs. Patterson put a motherly arm around her shoulders. "Whatever you have been through, it is over now. You are safe here." Olivia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Mrs. Patterson patted her shoulder and then tactfully withdrew, closing the door behind her and leaving Olivia alone. She sank down onto the bed, testing its firmness, and then lay back and stared at the ceiling. This morning she had been a prisoner, shackled and destined to be sold to the highest bidder. Now she had a job, a room of her own, and a future that was hers to shape. And it was all because of Matthew Gallagher, a cowboy who had bought her freedom and asked nothing in return. She did not know what she felt for him yet. Gratitude, certainly. Relief, absolutely. But there was something else too, something that had sparked to life when he smiled at her or when his hand had held hers with such unexpected gentleness. It was too soon to call it affection, much less anything stronger. But it was there, a tiny flame in the darkness, and Olivia found herself hoping it would grow. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Norton, may I come in?" Matthew's voice was polite and slightly hesitant. "Yes, of course." Olivia sat up quickly, smoothing her hair. Matthew opened the door but remained in the hallway, respecting the boundary of her private space. He held a bundle of clothing in his arms. "Mrs. Patterson thought you might need some fresh clothes. These belonged to my sister Clara when she lived here. She is about your size, and she left them behind when she married and moved to Leadville. If they fit, you are welcome to keep them." "Thank you." Olivia stood and took the bundle from him, feeling the soft fabric of cotton dresses and the sturdy weave of work aprons. "You have been more than generous. I am just trying to make sure you have what you need." Matthew hesitated, then asked, "Are you all right?" "I know this has been a difficult day." "I am better than all right," Olivia said honestly. "I am grateful and I am hopeful, and those are two things I have not felt in a very long time." Matthew's expression softened. "Good, that is good." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking almost shy. "Mrs. Patterson is making dinner for everyone tonight, and the ranch hands will be joining us. I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to meet them. But if you would prefer to eat in your room and rest, I completely understand." "No, I will join you. I should meet the people I will be cooking for." Olivia managed a smile. "Though I hope they are not expecting anything too elaborate tonight. They will eat anything that is not burned or still moving, so you do not have to worry about their standards." Matthew returned her smile, and then he nodded and stepped back. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour. Take your time." After he left, Olivia sorted through the clothing he had brought her. There were 3 dresses, all well made and carefully mended, along with 2 aprons, some undergarments, and even a pair of sturdy boots that looked like they had barely been worn. She selected a dress in a soft blue calico and changed out of her filthy, torn clothing, relishing the feeling of clean fabric against her skin. The dress fit reasonably well, perhaps a bit loose in the waist, but nothing that could not be easily altered. She used the water in the pitcher on the washstand to clean her face and hands, and attempted to tame her hair, which was matted with dust and badly in need of a proper washing. When she emerged from her room, the sun was beginning to set, and the house was filled with the rich aroma of roasting meat and vegetables. Voices came from the main room, male and hearty, and Olivia took a deep breath to steady her nerves before walking in to join them. Matthew was standing by the fireplace talking to 3 men who were clearly his ranch hands. All conversation stopped when Olivia entered, and 4 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Matthew immediately stepped forward, his expression welcoming. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Olivia Norton. She will be taking over as housekeeper when Mrs. Patterson leaves. Miss Norton, these are my ranch hands. Sam Cooper has been with me since I bought this place. Jack Murphy joined us 2 years ago, and Billy Henderson is our newest addition, though he has already proven himself invaluable." Sam was a lean man in his 40s with graying hair and a weathered face. Jack was younger, perhaps 30, with red hair and a friendly grin. Billy was the youngest of the 3, barely out of his teens, with an earnest expression and hands that looked too big for his wrists. They all nodded respectfully to Olivia, and Sam even removed his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Norton," Sam said. "Mrs. Patterson has been telling us all about you." "Only good things, I hope," Olivia replied, finding her voice. "She said you were a friend of Matthew's and that you would be joining the household. That is good enough for us." Jack's grin widened. "And if you can cook half as well as Mrs. Patterson, we will be happy men." "No pressure, though," Billy added quickly, elbowing Jack in the ribs. "We are grateful for anything that is not beans and hardtack." The easy banter helped Olivia relax, and by the time Mrs. Patterson called them all to the table, she was actually smiling. Dinner was a hearty affair of roasted beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and a dried apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with the ranch hands telling stories about their work and teasing each other good-naturedly. Matthew sat at the head of the table with Olivia on his right and Mrs. Patterson on his left, and he kept the conversation going with well-timed questions and gentle humor. Olivia found herself watching him throughout the meal, noticing the way he listened attentively when others spoke, the way he made sure everyone was included in the conversation, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He was clearly respected by his men, and equally clearly he respected them in return. There was none of the cruelty or capriciousness she had witnessed in her uncle, none of the unpredictability that had made every day a minefield. Matthew was steady, grounded, and fundamentally decent, and Olivia felt something in her chest expand with each passing moment. After dinner, the ranch hands excused themselves and headed back to the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Patterson began clearing the table. Olivia immediately stood to help, but the older woman waved her away. "You have had a long day, dear. Why do not you sit on the porch and enjoy the evening? Matthew, take her outside and show her the stars. They are particularly beautiful tonight." Matthew caught Olivia's eye and gestured toward the front door. "Would you like to? Mrs. Patterson is right. The stars are spectacular this far up in the mountains. I would like that very much." They stepped out onto the porch into the gathering dusk. The air had cooled considerably with the setting of the sun, and Olivia wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. Without a word, Matthew disappeared back inside and returned a moment later with a thick wool shawl, which he draped around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling the shawl close. They stood side by side at the porch railing, looking out over the valley as the last light faded from the sky. One by one, stars began to appear overhead, first a handful and then dozens, then hundreds, until the entire sky was ablaze with them. Olivia had never seen so many stars, not even in her childhood when her father had taken her outside on clear nights and taught her the names of the constellations. Here in the mountains, far from any city lights, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of diamonds, and the stars seemed close enough to touch. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It never gets old," Matthew agreed. "I have seen this view 1,000 times, and it still takes my breath away every single time." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said softly, "I am glad you are here, Olivia. I know the circumstances were not ideal, but I am glad our paths crossed today." Olivia turned to look at him and found he was already looking at her. In the starlight, his features were softened, mysterious, and her heart stuttered in her chest. "I am glad, too," she said. "You saved my life today, Matthew. I do not think you understand what that means to me." "You would have found a way to save yourself," Matthew said with quiet certainty. "You are stronger than you think. I just happened to provide an opportunity. Nevertheless, I am grateful." Olivia hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her all evening. "Why are you not married? You have a successful ranch, you are kind and decent, and you are certainly handsome enough. Surely there are women in fair play who would be interested." Matthew chuckled, but there was a hint of sadness in the sound. "There was someone once. A girl I knew back in Missouri before the war. We were going to be married, but then the war started and I enlisted. By the time I came back, she had married someone else. I do not blame her. It was a long war and she had no way of knowing if I would ever return." He paused, his gaze distant. "After that, I focused on building the ranch, on creating something of value. I told myself there would be time for courting later, but the years just kept passing. And now here I am, 27 years old and still alone." "You are not alone," Olivia said gently. "You have your ranch hands, Mrs. Patterson, your friends in town, and now you have me, at least as an employee." "I would like to think we could be friends too," Matthew said, turning to face her fully. "If you are willing." "I am willing." Olivia held out her hand, and after a moment, Matthew took it in his. His hand was warm and strong, and he held hers carefully, mindful of her injured wrists. They stood like that for a long moment, hand in hand under the stars, and Olivia felt that tiny flame in her chest burn a little brighter. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Mrs. Patterson trained Olivia in the running of the household. There was much to learn, from how Matthew preferred his coffee to which suppliers in town offered the best prices to the particular quirks of the cast iron stove that required constant attention to avoid burning everything to cinders. Olivia absorbed it all eagerly, determined to prove herself worthy of the opportunity Matthew had given her. Mrs. Patterson proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and thorough, and she clearly cared deeply about both Matthew and the ranch. "He is a good man," she told Olivia one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough together in the kitchen. "He works himself too hard sometimes, and he does not always remember to take care of himself, but his heart is in the right place. You will do well here, dear, as long as you are honest with him and do not try to take advantage." "I would never," Olivia said, horrified at the suggestion. "I know you would not. I can see it in your eyes. You have a good heart too, Mrs. Patterson shaped her dough into a loaf and set it in a pan to rise. "But I will warn you of something, if you will forgive an old woman's meddling. Matthew is not the sort of man to make advances on a woman in his employ. He has too much respect for boundaries and too much integrity. So if you find yourself developing feelings for him, which I suspect you already are, you will need to be the one to let him know. Otherwise, he will maintain a respectful distance forever, even if it kills him." Olivia felt her cheeks burn. "I do not know what you mean." "Of course you do not." Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. "Just remember what I said. Now, let us work on that pie crust. You are still making it too thick." True to Matthew's word, he had one of the ranch hands bring around a gentle mare for Olivia to ride. The horse was a pretty chestnut with a white star on her forehead, and Matthew introduced them in the corral one sunny morning. "Her name is Daisy, and she is the calmest horse on the ranch. She will not spook at anything short of a mountain lion, and even then she is more likely to just give it a disdainful look and keep walking." Matthew stroked the mare's neck affectionately. "Do you want to try riding her?" Olivia approached the horse slowly, extending her hand for Daisy to sniff. The mare's breath was warm and sweet, and she nuzzled Olivia's palm gently. "Hello, Daisy. You are a beautiful girl, are you not?" With Matthew's help, Olivia saddled the mare and then mounted, settling into the saddle with a sense of rightness that surprised her. It had been so long since she had ridden, but her body remembered the movements, the balance required, the subtle communication between rider and horse. Matthew swung up onto Copper, and together they rode out of the corral and into the valley. They kept to an easy walk at first, letting Olivia reacquaint herself with riding. But as her confidence grew, they moved up to a trot and then a gentle canter, riding along the creek that bisected the valley. The water sparkled in the morning sun, and cattle grazed peacefully on either side, occasionally lifting their heads to watch the riders pass. Olivia felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had not experienced in years, and when she turned to look at Matthew riding beside her, she found him watching her with a smile that made her heart skip. "You ride well," he called over the sound of hoofbeats. "So do you," she called back, laughing. They rode for over an hour, and by the time they returned to the ranch, Olivia's legs were sore and her face was flushed from the exercise and the wind, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Matthew helped her dismount, and then showed her how to unsaddle Daisy and brush her down, his hands occasionally covering hers to correct her grip or demonstrate a technique. Each touch sent little sparks of awareness through Olivia, and she found herself hyper-conscious of his proximity, The warmth of his body, the low timbre of his voice as he explained what he was doing. On Mrs. Patterson's last day, Matthew organized a small farewell party, inviting several people from town, including the bartender Tom and his daughter Sarah, the local doctor and his wife, and a few other ranchers and their families. Olivia spent the day cooking with Mrs. Patterson's help, preparing roasts and vegetables and multiple pies, and by evening the house was filled with delicious smells and warm lamplight. The party was a success, with plenty of food and drink and lively conversation. Olivia stayed mostly in the background, replenishing dishes and making sure everyone had what they needed. But she could not help noticing the way several women looked at Matthew with obvious interest. Sarah, in particular, seemed to find excuses to stand near him, touching his arm and laughing at his jokes with a familiarity that made Olivia's stomach twist with an emotion she did not want to examine too closely. Mrs. Patterson noticed Olivia's distraction and pulled her aside in the kitchen. "Pay no attention to Sarah. She has been setting her cap at Matthew for 2 years, but he has never shown any interest beyond friendship. It is none of my business who Matthew is interested in," Olivia said, perhaps more sharply than she intended. "Of course it is not." Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled. "But for what it is worth, I have seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, and it is not the way he looks at Sarah." Before Olivia could respond, Matthew appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Patterson, everyone is asking for you. They want to make a toast before you leave." The older woman patted Olivia's hand one last time and then swept out into the main room, where a chorus of affectionate greetings rose up. Matthew lingered in the doorway, his gaze finding Olivia's. "You have done an amazing job today. The food is incredible and everything has run smoothly. Mrs. Patterson could not have done better herself. Thank you. I had a good teacher. And now you are on your own." Matthew's expression turned serious. "If you need anything, or if you have any problems, you come to me directly, all right?" "All right." Olivia nodded, touched by his concern. They stood looking at each other for a moment longer, and Olivia felt the air between them charged with possibility. But then someone called Matthew's name from the other room, and the moment was broken. He gave her a rueful smile and disappeared back into the party, leaving Olivia alone with her racing heart and confused feelings. The next morning, Mrs. Patterson left for Denver on the early stage, and Olivia found herself truly alone in her new role. She threw herself into the work with determined energy, rising before dawn to make breakfast for Matthew and the ranch hands, spending her days cleaning and cooking and managing the household, and falling into bed exhausted each night. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and she took pride in doing it well. Matthew was unfailingly considerate and appreciative, always thanking her for meals and noticing when she had done something extra like mending his shirts or organizing the pantry. He was also careful to maintain professional boundaries, never coming into her room or asking anything of her beyond her stated duties. It was exactly the respectful treatment he had promised, and Olivia should have been grateful. But as the days turned into weeks, she found herself growing frustrated with the distance between them. They ate meals together with the ranch hands, and sometimes in the evenings they would sit on the porch and talk about their days, but there was always a careful formality to their interactions. Matthew never touched her casually the way he had in those first few days, never held her hand or stood close enough for their shoulders to brush. It was as if he had deliberately erected a wall between them, and Olivia did not know how to breach it without risking everything. She thought often about what Mrs. Patterson had said, about how Matthew would maintain a respectful distance forever unless she made the first move. But how could she do that? What if she was wrong about the way he felt? What if those moments when she caught him watching her with soft eyes were just her imagination? She would not only embarrass herself, she would jeopardize her job and her home, and she could not afford to lose either. One evening in late August, about 6 weeks after Olivia had arrived at the ranch, Matthew came in from a long day of moving cattle to a new pasture looking exhausted and discouraged. Olivia had kept his dinner warm and she served it to him at the table while the ranch hands ate in the bunkhouse, giving him some privacy to decompress. "Is everything all right?" she asked as she poured him coffee. "Just tired and worried." Matthew rubbed his hand over his face. "I lost 3 head of cattle this week, and I am not sure if it was predators or rustlers or just bad luck. If it is rustlers, I am going to have to hire more men to patrol the property, which I can barely afford. If it is predators, I need to organize a hunt, which takes time away from other work. And if it is bad luck, then I just have to accept the loss and move on, but that is hard when every head counts." Olivia set the coffee pot down and took the chair next to him, her heart aching at the strain in his voice. "Can I help in any way? You already help more than you know. Coming home to a clean house and a hot meal and your company makes even the hardest days bearable." Matthew looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes. "I do not know what I would do without you, Olivia." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Olivia felt her pulse quicken, and before she could second-guess herself, she reached out and covered his hand with hers where it rested on the table. "You will not have to find out. I am not going anywhere." Matthew stared down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. For a terrible moment, Olivia thought she had overstepped, that he was going to pull away and reinforce those careful boundaries. But then his fingers curled around hers, holding tight, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were full of longing and conflict. "Olivia, I cannot ask you to stay out of obligation or gratitude. You deserve more than that." "I am not staying out of obligation," Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am staying because I want to, because I care about you, Matthew. More than I should, probably, given that you are my employer and I have only known you for 6 weeks, but I cannot help how I feel." Matthew drew in a sharp breath. "You should not say things like that to me." "Why not? Is it not true for you?" Olivia's courage was failing, but she forced herself to continue. "Or am I wrong? Have I misread the way you look at me sometimes, the way you smile when I come into a room? You have not misread anything." Matthew's voice was rough with emotion. "I have been half in love with you since the day I met you, Olivia, but I bought your freedom. You work for me. I have power over you, and I will not use that power to pressure you into something you might not truly want." "You are not pressuring me. I am telling you what I want." Olivia tightened her grip on his hand. "I want to be more than your housekeeper, Matthew. I want to be with you. If you feel the same way, then please stop holding back." For a long moment, Matthew just looked at her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to read her soul. And then, slowly, carefully, he lifted his free hand and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with heartbreaking tenderness. "I feel the same way. I have wanted to tell you for weeks, but I was afraid. Afraid of scaring you, afraid of taking advantage, afraid of ruining what we already have. You could never take advantage of me. You gave me my freedom, remember? Everything I do now is my choice, and I choose this. I choose you." Olivia leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed. "Please, Matthew." She did not even know what she was asking for, but Matthew seemed to understand. He stood, drawing her to her feet, and then he wrapped his arms around her and held her close. Olivia pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the solid strength of his body and the rapid beating of his heart. For the first time since her parents died, she felt safe. She felt home. "I will court you properly," Matthew murmured against her hair. "I will take you to dances and church socials and picnics. I will introduce you to everyone as the woman I am courting, not as my housekeeper. And when enough time has passed that we are both certain this is real, I will ask you to marry me, if you will have me." Olivia pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes shining with happy tears. "I will have you. I am already certain, Matthew, but if you need time, I will give it to you." Matthew smiled down at her, that beautiful, transformative smile that made her heart sing. "Then I will try not to take too long." And then, with exquisite gentleness, he bent his head and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, their lips barely brushing. But it sent waves of warmth through Olivia's entire body. And when Matthew drew back, she made a small sound of protest and pulled him down for another. This time the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more passionate, and Olivia felt herself melting against him, her fingers tangling in his hair. Matthew's arms tightened around her, and for several long, glorious moments, nothing else existed except the two of them and the feeling of rightness that pulsed between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Matthew rested his forehead against hers and laughed softly. "I have been wanting to do that for so long." "So have I," Olivia admitted. "Every time you smiled at me, every time you said my name, I wanted to kiss you. Well, now you can, whenever you want." Matthew pressed another quick kiss to her lips as if he could not quite help himself. "Though we should probably be discreet around the ranch hands. I do not want them thinking I am taking liberties with my housekeeper. You are courting me now, remember? There are no liberties, only mutual affection." Olivia grinned up at him, giddy with happiness. They spent the rest of the evening sitting close together on the porch, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. Matthew told her more about his childhood in Missouri, about the war and the things he had seen, about his dreams for the ranch and his hopes for the future. Olivia shared her own stories, about growing up with loving parents who had encouraged her education and independence, about the devastation of losing them, about the nightmare of living with Bernard. "I wish I could have met your parents," Matthew said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "They sound like wonderful people. They would have liked you. My father always said the measure of a man was not what he had, but what he did with what he was given. You have built something good here, Matthew. He would have respected that. I hope I can live up to that respect." Matthew brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "And I hope I can make you as happy as you have made me." "You already do," Olivia assured him. "Every single day." True to his word, Matthew began courting Olivia in earnest. He took her into Fairplay on Saturdays to attend barn dances and social gatherings, always introducing her as the woman he was courting and making sure everyone knew she was more than just his housekeeper. At first there was some gossip, inevitable in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. A few of the more proper ladies raised their eyebrows at the speed of the courtship, and whispered about the impropriety of an employer courting his employee. But Matthew's reputation was solid, and Olivia's quiet dignity and obvious happiness soon won over even the skeptics. Sarah, the bartender's daughter, was less easily mollified. She made a few pointed comments about Matthew's sudden interest in his housekeeper, and on one memorable occasion, she actually approached Olivia at a church social and suggested that she was taking advantage of Matthew's good nature. "He feels responsible for you because he helped you out of a difficult situation," Sarah said with false sweetness. "But that does not mean you should trap him into a relationship he might not truly want." Olivia had learned a lot about standing up for herself in the months since leaving her uncle, and she met Sarah's eyes steadily. "Matthew is a grown man capable of making his own decisions. If he did not want to court me, he would not be doing it." And frankly, Sarah, his choices are none of your business." Sarah's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Matthew appeared at Olivia's side, slipping his arm around her waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem at all," Olivia said sweetly. "Sarah was just leaving." Sarah shot them both a venomous look and flounced away, and Matthew looked down at Olivia with admiration. "I am impressed, and a little aroused if I am being honest. There is something very attractive about watching you put someone in their place." Olivia laughed and swatted his chest. "Behave yourself. We are in church." "We are outside the church," Matthew corrected, but he was grinning. As summer faded into autumn, Olivia settled more deeply into her life at the ranch. She continued to manage the household, but now she also helped with other aspects of the ranch operation, keeping the books and managing supplies and even assisting with the cattle when extra hands were needed. The ranch hands accepted her presence without question, and Sam in particular seemed to have adopted her as a sort of honorary little sister, offering advice and looking out for her welfare. Matthew and Olivia spent as much time together as their work allowed, stealing moments throughout the day and spending their evenings on the porch or in the parlor, talking and laughing and simply being together. They kissed often, sometimes chastely and sometimes with a passion that left them both breathless and aching for more. But Matthew was always careful not to push too far, always respectful of the boundaries that existed until they were married. "I want you," he told her one evening in late September as they sat together on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting on his chest. "I want you so much it is driving me half crazy, but I will not dishonor you by taking what should wait for our wedding night." "What if I want to give it to you?" Olivia asked, her fingers playing with the buttons of his shirt. Matthew groaned and captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You are not making this easy for me, woman." "I do not want to make it easy. I want to marry you, Matthew." "I have wanted it for months now. Why are we waiting?" "Because I want to make sure you are certain, because I do not want anyone to say I rushed you or took advantage." Matthew tilted her face up so he could look into her eyes. "But if you are truly ready, if you are truly certain, then I will marry you tomorrow if you will have me." Olivia's heart soared. "Yes, yes, I am certain. I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Matthew kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with love and desire and commitment. "Then we will talk to the preacher on Sunday. I want to do this right, with a proper ceremony and the whole town there to witness. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours, now and forever." "Now and forever," Olivia echoed, and sealed the promise with another kiss. They were married on a crisp October afternoon when the aspens had turned to gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. The ceremony took place in the small church in Fairplay, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Olivia wore a dress that had belonged to Matthew's mother, a beautiful creation of ivory silk and lace that Mrs. Patterson had carefully preserved and then altered to fit Olivia's smaller frame. Matthew wore his best suit, and he looked so handsome standing at the altar waiting for her that Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Sam walked her down the aisle, since she had no family of her own to perform the honor, and he squeezed her hand gently before placing it in Matthew's. "You take care of her," he said gruffly to Matthew. "She is a good woman and she deserves to be happy." "I will spend every day of my life making sure she is," Matthew promised, and the sincerity in his voice made Olivia's heart overflow. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful, full of traditional vows and blessings. When the preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife and told Matthew he could kiss his bride, the whole church erupted in cheers and applause. Matthew pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her with a thoroughness that probably scandalized some of the older ladies, but Olivia did not care. She was married to the man she loved, the man who had saved her and given her a future, and nothing else mattered. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than Olivia had ever seen in one place. There was music and dancing and toasts, and Olivia found herself passed from one partner to another as everyone wanted to dance with the bride. But her eyes always sought out Matthew, and his always found hers, and the love and longing that passed between them was palpable. Finally, as the sun began to set and the guests started to drift away, Matthew claimed Olivia for one last dance. He held her close as they swayed to the music, his cheek pressed against her hair, and Olivia felt a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. "Are you happy?" Matthew murmured. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Olivia replied. "How did I get so lucky to find you? I think I am the lucky one. You walked into that saloon 6 months ago and changed my entire life." Matthew pulled back just enough to look down at her, his eyes warm with love. "I cannot wait to spend the rest of my life with you, Olivia Gallagher." Olivia Gallagher. She tested the name silently and found it perfect. "I love you, Matthew. I love you too, so much." He kissed her softly, a promise and a benediction. And then he took her hand and led her toward the house as the last guests called out their congratulations and good wishes. Their wedding night was everything Olivia had dreamed of and more. Matthew was gentle and patient, taking his time to worship every inch of her body, bringing her to heights of pleasure she had never imagined. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Two halves of a whole finally united. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the big bed in Matthew's room, which was now their room, talking softly and touching each other with wonder. "I was afraid I had forgotten how to be happy," Olivia confessed, her fingers tracing patterns on Matthew's chest. "After my parents died and I went to live with Bernard, I thought happiness was something from my past, something I would never feel again. But you gave it back to me. You gave me everything." Matthew caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You gave me everything too. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and surviving but not really living. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to dream, to love. I will be grateful for you every day for the rest of my life." They made love again as the moon rose outside their window, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Olivia felt complete in a way she had never experienced before. She had found her home, her partner, her forever. And it had all started with a cowboy who bought her freedom and asked nothing in return, but who had received everything anyway. The winter that followed their marriage was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them confined to the ranch for days at a time. But Olivia did not mind. She loved the cozy intimacy of being snowed in with Matthew, spending long evenings by the fire reading or talking, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. The ranch hands stayed mostly in the bunkhouse during the worst of the weather, venturing out only to tend to the cattle and horses, and Olivia took pleasure in cooking hearty meals for everyone and making sure they had warm clothes and dry boots. Matthew proved to be everything Olivia had hoped for in a husband: loving, attentive, and endlessly considerate. He helped her with household chores without being asked, always consulted her on ranch decisions, and never went to bed without kissing her goodnight and telling her he loved her. In turn, Olivia supported his work, managed their home with skill and efficiency, and made sure he took time to rest and enjoy life instead of working himself into exhaustion. By spring, Olivia suspected she might be pregnant, and a visit to the doctor in town confirmed it. She was nervous about telling Matthew, worried about how the news might affect their still new marriage, but she need not have been concerned. When she finally worked up the courage to tell him one evening after dinner, his face lit up with such joy that she immediately felt foolish for worrying. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." Matthew picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight. "When? How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Should you be resting more? I am due in October. I feel fine except for some morning sickness, and I do not need to rest more. The doctor said I am perfectly healthy and should continue my normal activities for now." Olivia laughed at his exuberance, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, thrilled, over the moon." Matthew set her down gently and then knelt before her, pressing a kiss to her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than I can say." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks at the tenderness of the gesture. "You are going to be such a good father." "I am certainly going to try." Matthew stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Thank you, Olivia, for this, for everything. You have made my life complete." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Olivia continued to manage the household through the summer with only minor modifications to accommodate her growing belly. Matthew was almost comically overprotective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or not resting enough, but Olivia found his concern endearing rather than annoying. The ranch hands also rallied around her, taking on extra chores to lighten her load and treating her with a reverence usually reserved for something fragile and precious. As her due date approached, Matthew became increasingly nervous, jumping at every small sound and constantly checking on her. Olivia tried to reassure him, but she understood his anxiety. Childbirth was dangerous, and many women did not survive it, but she refused to dwell on the risks, instead focusing on the joy of bringing their child into the world. Their son was born on a cool October evening exactly 1 year after their wedding, arriving quickly and with less fuss than anyone had anticipated. The doctor barely made it to the ranch in time, and Matthew held Olivia's hand through the entire labor, murmuring encouragement and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When the baby finally emerged, screaming his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world, Olivia felt a rush of love so powerful it took her breath away. "A boy," the doctor announced, cleaning the infant and wrapping him in a soft blanket. "A healthy, strong boy." Matthew cut the cord with trembling hands, and then the doctor placed the baby in Olivia's arms. She looked down at her son, at his tiny scrunched face and flailing fists, and felt her heart expand to accommodate this new, overwhelming love. He had Matthew's dark hair and what looked like it might be her blue eyes, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "I am your mother and I love you so much." Matthew leaned over her shoulder, his own eyes wet with tears. "He is perfect." "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision, but now Olivia knew exactly what felt right. "I want to name him James, after my father. James Gallagher." "James Gallagher." Matthew tested the name and then nodded. "It is perfect." Welcome to the world, James. The first few weeks of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming and more wonderful than Olivia could have imagined. James was a good baby for the most part, sleeping in stretches and nursing well, but he still demanded constant attention and care. Matthew threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he fussed, and falling asleep in the rocking chair with his son on his chest. Olivia would sometimes wake in the middle of the night and find Matthew's side of the bed empty. She would creep to the nursery they had set up in the small room next to theirs, and find him standing over James's cradle, just watching the baby sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. It made her fall in love with him all over again, seeing how deeply he loved their son. As James grew from a newborn to an infant, and then to a toddler, the ranch prospered. Matthew's hard work and careful management paid off, and he was able to expand his herd and hire additional hands. Money was no longer as tight, and they were able to make improvements to the house and outbuildings. But despite their increased prosperity, Matthew and Olivia never forgot where they had come from or how they had found each other. One afternoon in the summer when James was almost 2 years old, Olivia was working in her garden when a dusty rider approached the house. She straightened up, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her blood run cold when she recognized the rider. It was Bernard. Her uncle looked even worse than she remembered, gaunt and yellowed and swaying in his saddle. He dismounted clumsily and stumbled toward her, and Olivia backed away instinctively, her heart pounding. "Olivia," Bernard croaked, "I need your help. You need to leave." Olivia was surprised by how steady her voice was despite her fear. "You have no business here, please. I am dying. The doctor said it is my liver and I have only a few months at most." Bernard's eyes, once so sharp and mean, were now watery and pleading. "I have no one else. You are my only family." "You sold me for whiskey," Olivia said flatly. "You shackled me and dragged me into a saloon and tried to trade me like livestock. You lost any claim to family that day. I know what I did was wrong." Bernard swayed and had to catch himself on the fence post. "I was drunk and desperate and stupid, but I am trying to make amends before I die. Please, Olivia, I do not want to die alone." Before Olivia could respond, Matthew appeared around the corner of the house with James on his shoulders. He took one look at Bernard and his expression hardened. He lifted James down and handed him to Olivia, then stepped between her and her uncle. "You need to leave," Matthew said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now. I just want to talk to my niece," Bernard whined, "to apologize for what I did. You had your chance to apologize 3 years ago. You chose whiskey instead." Matthew crossed his arms over his chest, a wall of protection between Bernard and his family. "Olivia does not owe you anything, least of all forgiveness. Now get back on your horse and ride out of here before I help you along." Bernard looked past Matthew to Olivia, his expression desperate. "Please, I am sorry. I am truly sorry." Olivia held James close, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. She thought about all the pain Bernard had caused her, all the fear and humiliation and suffering. She thought about the shackles on her wrists, and the moment when she had believed her life was truly over. And then she thought about Matthew stepping forward in that saloon, buying her freedom and asking nothing in return. She thought about the life she had built, the happiness she had found, the family she had created. "I forgive you," she said quietly, and felt Matthew's surprise. "I forgive you, Bernard, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry hatred in my heart. But forgiveness does not mean I want you in my life. You are not welcome here and you never will be. Go die wherever you choose, but do not come back here again." Bernard stared at her for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. "Thank you. That is more than I deserved." He turned and stumbled back to his horse, hauling himself into the saddle with difficulty. "I hope you have a good life, Olivia. You deserved better than you got from me." He rode away without looking back, and Olivia watched him go with a strange sense of finality. Matthew turned to her, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." Olivia shifted James to her other hip and reached for Matthew's hand. "Better than fine, actually. I meant what I said. I forgive him, not for his sake but for mine. I do not want to waste any more energy on anger or bitterness. I want to focus on what I have, not what was taken from me." Matthew pulled her close, careful not to squish James between them. "You are remarkable, you know that. I learned from the best." Olivia smiled up at him. "You taught me that kindness and forgiveness are not weaknesses, Matthew. You showed me by example every single day." "Mama, who was that man?" James asked, his small face scrunched with concern. "No one important, sweetheart, just someone from a long time ago." Olivia kissed his forehead. "Are you hungry? Should we go inside and make some cookies?" James's face immediately brightened at the mention of cookies, and the tension of the moment dissolved. They went inside together, the three of them, and Olivia found herself profoundly grateful for this life, this family, this love. Bernard had tried to destroy her, had nearly succeeded, but in the end his cruelty had led her to Matthew. And that was worth every moment of suffering she had endured. Bernard died 3 months later. Olivia learned about it when the sheriff came to the ranch to inform her, since she was listed as next of kin. He had died alone in a boarding house in Denver, with nothing to his name but the clothes on his back and 3 empty whiskey bottles on the nightstand. The sheriff asked if Olivia wanted to claim the body, and she said no. "Let the county bury him," she said. She had already said her goodbyes. Life continued its steady rhythm. Olivia became pregnant again the following spring, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Clara, after Matthew's sister. Clara was a tiny, delicate baby with blonde hair and Matthew's honey-colored eyes, and she wrapped her father around her little finger from the first moment he held her. James, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything, from changing her diapers to feeding her bottles of expressed milk when Olivia needed a break. The ranch continued to prosper, and Matthew's reputation as a fair and honest rancher grew throughout the territory. He was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association and became a respected voice in the community. But no matter how busy he became, he always made time for his family, always came home for dinner, always tucked James and Clara into bed with stories and kisses. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Matthew surprised Olivia with a gift. He led her outside after dinner to where a new structure had been built near the main house. It was a small building, neat and well constructed, with large windows and a sign above the door that read Norton General Store. Olivia stared at it in confusion. "I do not understand." "It is for you," Matthew said, his eyes shining with excitement. "I know you have been wanting to contribute more to the household income beyond managing our home, and I thought you might enjoy running a store. We are far enough from town that the ranch hands and neighboring ranchers would appreciate having a place to buy supplies without making the trip to Fairplay. And I thought you could stock it with goods you make yourself, preserves, baked goods, maybe even clothing. Whatever you want." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Matthew, this is too much. It is not nearly enough. You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. Let me give you this. Your own business, your own independence. Just like your father wanted for you." Matthew took her hands in his. "The building is in your name, and any profits are yours to keep or invest as you see fit. I want you to have something that is entirely yours." Olivia threw her arms around his neck, laughing and crying at the same time. "How did I get so lucky to find you? I ask myself the same question every day about you." Matthew held her close, and they stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and in the life they had built together. The store was a success from the beginning. Olivia stocked it with dry goods ordered from Denver, as well as her own preserves, baked goods, and hand-sewn items. The ranch hands and neighboring families were grateful for the convenience, and soon she had a steady stream of customers. She enjoyed the work, enjoyed the independence and the sense of accomplishment it brought. And Matthew was always her biggest supporter, praising her business acumen and encouraging her to expand as demand grew. More children followed over the years. A second son they named Samuel, after the ranch hand who had been so kind to Olivia from the beginning. Then twin daughters, Emma and Rose, who kept everyone on their toes with their boundless energy and mischief. Each pregnancy was different, each birth an adventure, but through it all Matthew was there, steady and supportive and endlessly loving. As the children grew, they became integral parts of the ranch operation. James, serious and responsible even as a young boy, followed his father everywhere and learned the ranching business from the ground up. Clara was quieter but observant, with a gift for understanding animals that made her invaluable in the stables. Samuel was the dreamer, always with a book in his hand and stories in his head. And the twins were a force of nature, impossible to separate and constantly getting into good-natured trouble. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Matthew and Olivia sat on their porch in the evening twilight, watching their children play in the yard. James, now almost 11, was pushing Clara on the rope swing Matthew had hung from the big oak tree. Samuel was reading aloud to the twins, who were actually sitting still for once, captivated by whatever tale he was spinning. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Olivia asked, leaning against Matthew's shoulder. "Some days it feels like a lifetime. Other days it feels like just yesterday that I walked into that saloon and saw you standing there." Matthew pressed a kiss to her temple. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one." Olivia turned to look at him, taking in his face that was so dear and familiar now. He had aged well, with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples and lines around his eyes that came from years of smiling. "You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have, Matthew. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me myself back when I thought I had lost her forever." "You gave yourself back," Matthew corrected gently. "I just provided an opportunity. Everything else, all the strength and courage and determination it took to build this life, that came from you." "We built it together," Olivia said. "And we will keep building it together, for as long as we both shall live." "For as long as we both shall live," Matthew echoed and sealed the promise with a kiss. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of moments both ordinary and extraordinary. There were hard times, of course, as there always are. Years when the weather was bad and the cattle struggled. Years when illness swept through and they held their breath waiting to see if their children would be spared. Years when money was tight and they had to make difficult choices. But through it all, Matthew and Olivia faced every challenge together, drawing strength from each other and from the unshakable foundation of their love. James grew into a fine young man, as steady and hardworking as his father, and eventually took over more and more of the day-to-day ranch operations. Clara married a young veterinarian from Denver and moved to town, though she visited often with her own growing family. Samuel earned a scholarship to college back east and became a teacher, writing long letters home about his adventures in the wider world. The twins, inseparable as always, opened a bakery together in Fairplay that became famous throughout the territory for its pies and cakes. Matthew and Olivia grew old together, their dark hair turning silver, their faces weathering with time but their eyes still bright with love when they looked at each other. They spent their later years surrounded by children and grandchildren, passing down stories and wisdom and the values that had sustained them through decades of life together. One summer evening when they were both in their 70s, they sat together on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The ranch was still thriving under James's management, and the valley was green and lush with the season's growth. Olivia's store, now run by one of her granddaughters, was still a fixture of the community, and the love between Matthew and Olivia had only deepened with time, weathering into something profound and unshakable. "You remember the day we met?" Olivia asked, her hand in Matthew's as it had been so many times before. "Every detail," Matthew replied. "You were standing in that saloon in your torn dress and your uncle was trying to sell you, and I thought I had never seen anyone so brave. Because despite everything, you held your head high. You did not let him break you. I was not feeling very brave. I was terrified." Olivia smiled at the memory, so distant now it almost seemed like a story about someone else. "And then you stepped forward and changed everything. You gave me my freedom without asking for anything in return." "I got everything in return," Matthew said softly. "I got you. I got a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I got 50 years of love and laughter and family and joy. That is a pretty good return on 3 bottles of whiskey." Olivia laughed, the sound still bright and young despite her years. "Best investment you ever made, without question." Matthew brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, the same gesture he had made countless times over the decades. "I love you, Olivia Gallagher. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you always. And I love you, Matthew Gallagher. You saved me in that saloon, but you did more than that. You showed me what love could be, what partnership meant, what it felt like to be truly valued and cherished. You gave me a life worth living and a love worth keeping." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Around them, the sounds of their family drifted through the air, grandchildren laughing, dinner being prepared in the kitchen, the low murmur of adult conversations. It was a symphony of life, of love, of legacy. And at the heart of it all were Matthew and Olivia, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something extraordinary together. The story that had begun in a dusty saloon in Fairplay, Colorado, with a desperate girl and a compassionate cowboy, had bloomed into a love story for the ages. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of forgiveness, and the enduring nature of true love. And as Matthew and Olivia sat together in the twilight of their lives, surrounded by everything they had built and everyone they loved, they knew with absolute certainty that their story had been worth every moment, every challenge, every joy. Their love had transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. Their children had learned from their example what marriage should be, what partnership looked like, what it meant to face life's challenges with grace and courage. Their grandchildren would carry forward the values they had instilled, the lessons they had taught, the love they had demonstrated every single day. And the ranch they had built together would stand for generations as a testament to what could be achieved when 2 people committed themselves fully to each other and to a shared vision of the future. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky, Matthew and Olivia rose from their chairs and walked inside together, hand in hand as they had walked through life itself. Their story, which had begun with such pain and uncertainty, had become a beautiful testament to the redemptive power of love. And though they knew their time together was finite, they also knew that what they had built, the love, the family, the legacy, would endure long after they were gone. They had faced life together, and they would face whatever came next together too. Because that was what they had promised each other on that October afternoon so many years ago, standing before God and community with hands joined and hearts full. For better or worse, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death did them part, and neither of them would have changed a single moment of the journey they had shared. From that first meeting in a saloon to this evening in their old age, every moment had been precious, every memory a treasure. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and built a life that mattered. And that, in the end, was all anyone could ask for. That was the happy ending they had earned together. And it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dreamed possible when a cowboy bought a girl's freedom and asked nothing in return, never knowing he would receive everything in exchange.